What's going on, guys? Reisshub back with another video, and in today's video I want to cover everything I learned from the Frosty Frenzy Day 1. Let's get into it. Let's go into some round 1 tips from day 1 and then also some round 2. I'm going to try and apply it to tomorrow's format just to get you guys ready for that too. So the most important thing to know is that ELO is everything, and the first lobby and mostly second lobby players are very, very poor. Now, in the first lobby, the players who ended up coming between 491st and 500th, so basically the bottom 10 people who actually qualified, in their first 2 games, they had a highest elimination on average of 23.91. This meant that basically to qualify, you need to be dropping somewhere near a 20 bomb in your first game or 2. Now, obviously that's quite a big ask, but it's a lot that you need to be able to perform. Now that is extremely high. And this format was extremely elimination heavy. Placement only really starting to kick in once you got to 5th, which was super late into the game. So a lot of these players were taking huge advantage of this ELO. It's not really an ELO bug, just the fact that the ELO was so bad because it was Opens players. And Opens players split across every platform. So you can have Nintendo Switch players, console players, and obviously the average Champions PC player is going to be significantly better than these. So you really have to take advantage of that ELO and drop a huge elimination game 1. If you're eliminated off spawn yourself, you've got game 2 after that where you can come back and perform the same again. After that, it's going to be tough in game 3, but there were teams who obviously struggled dying off spawn in their first 2 games and then were able to make a massive kind of 20, 30, 40 elimination game. There's even a team who made a 50 elimination game in their first, second, or third games, and that'll push you straight up the leaderboards because of this poor ELO. Now, most of these teams who ended up performing like this didn't really do that much within their middle games, though. You can see a really steep curve between the people who got really big games at the start, then the second game usually wasn't as big, and the third was worse. 4th and 5th, these were like the 3rd, 4th, and 5th games in particular were by far the worst, but then that last game is where they popped off again. So really, a lot of these teams were qualifying in pretty much 2 games. They had a first or second game that was really large, the middle games were just kind of meh, and then the last game was another big pop-off. So don't be discouraged if you have a really good start and then you start to perform badly a few games. That last game really can't do anything for you, and you can just qualify up just purely because of that. So if you're in the Opens, if you really want to qualify and come in the top 10, these guys on average got around a 35.2 elims per in that kind of first or second game, which is ridiculous. One of the teams even picking up 50 eliminations. So again, if you want to qualify for this, in this particular format where it was extremely W key, you had to W key an extreme amount. Like the standard of games that are within EU is actually insane. That to qualify, you need to drop like a 24 elimination win. Now, obviously, I'm not saying you have to drop 24 eliminations to qualify. That's not what I'm saying, but this is what the people were doing, you know? Most of the time. Like there was the team that came in 495th in the first round, dropped 11 eliminations and then 10. But still, if you look through the leaderboards, that's actually just what's happening, high eliminations. So how do you kind of go about doing this in this first game? Well, what I really like to see is that the majority of the drops were not kind of like we've seen last season where people were dropping on just one POI, be it either Stark Industries or Doom. Really, most players were just dropping at their normal drop spot, which was just a POI. Obviously, a lot of these were Salty Towers and things like Sweaty Sands, but a lot of the teams were still placing either sometimes close to Edge Map and managing to pick up a lot of elims from that. So there's only 6 games in these, and if you want to W key efficiently, landing Edge Map probably isn't the right move, because basically you're going to spend so much time rotating that you're not going to have that much time to fight. So a lot of the times you're going to be better if you do have like a POI that's somewhere near the center map, not dead edge, just it'll get you a lot shorter rotations and allow you more time to fight. And kind of what some of these teams were mainly doing was rotating around the sand area. So some of the teams who landed Salty Towers, for example, they were then going north to Pleasant, then across east to Coliseum, then down and kind of all the way around the sound and back. And most of the players would have rotated in this kind of circle area past them at one point. So this is how they picked up a lot of eliminations then. And actually, a lot of this kind of standard curves for players not actually picking up that many in the early game, but it was way more in the mid game and then also in the end game because they were just W keying players in that moving zones because there was only a few alive, and this is kind of how these top players usually play a lot of these kind of more dead moving zones. So in summary, you don't have to go and drop Salty Towers to get high eliminations. Most teams were doing that if that was their drop anyway, but a lot of them just went for their normal drop spot. Another thing about the meta and how everyone is fighting, despite the fact everyone wants eliminations, the people who don't want eliminations All they did was run. So you have to be prepared. These guys are going to rift, they're going to shockwave, they're going to sand tunnel. These guys are going to try and get away from you as much as you can. You can also have like one teammate kind of get on height and ensure he kind of holds that as much as possible, just to pretend and make sure that if they shockwave away, you can kind of have someone who beams them out of the sky, the guy with the best AR aim. But all I'm saying is that if you're facing a poor team, just be prepared that they are going to run away from you. Also, the games are relatively dead, but the placement was pretty bad. How are we going to incorporate that in tomorrow? Because there's a lot more placement thresholds as it starts at 17 teams. It's the same as the FNCS trio format. If you weren't aware, watch my video on it. And eliminations are kind of less weighted, so it's going to be a little bit more placement based. Well, firstly, those eliminations are still going to count. That first game is still going to be extremely W key, still opens. It's going to be 20, 30, 40, 50 eliminations in that first game. And those kind of guidelines I set out earlier are probably going to be roughly similar, you know, somewhere between 20 elims to 30 elims if you want to place in those first two games. So that's a huge amount of elims to ask, in all honesty. So standard of EU in particular is extremely high. In some of these other regions, a little bit less, but that first game is still going to be really W key. Then after that, it's just going to be about playing placement and really consistent elims as you go, just like normal games would. So just remember, first game, extremely aggressive. And again, if you're not really that aggressive of a player and you're not a player who's that good at fighting, you might be worth just playing placement tomorrow because you can get away with playing placement. But overall, no, it's going to be really, really tough to compete in the opens against some of these other players that are just playing so aggressively and having these really high elimination games if you're only just picking up, say, 25 points for Victory Royale and a couple elims, whereas these guys are kind of getting 25 elims alone plus their own placement points. Another thing in round one is the fact that timings for everyone were really interesting because I suspected a ton of people would start late, but most of the time people didn't really actually start that late. They ended up starting pretty much on time. However, if they ended up not being able to actually finish out a game, so if they were eliminated off spawn, for example, that's the time they mostly took a 10-minute break. This happened in a lot of the times, basically pretty much for the people who qualified. There was actually two people in that kind of bottom 10 who took a break and then popped off and had like a massive, there was one that had like a 17 elimination fourth game, and another team who died off spawn instantly took a 10-minute break and then started at 15 minutes past the hour and ended up dropping a 40 bomb, and then you know, they ended up qualifying through basically because they just had a couple other good games after that. So yeah, you can start on time, maybe 5 minutes late. That's probably 5 minutes late is probably the kind of bang on. And then after that, if you don't do well, just take a small break, be it 5-10 minutes, depending on how much time you've got left and how many games you've played. And then you probably get into a slightly lower elo lobby and perform better there. Just wanted to get this out quickly just so I can get my thoughts together. Hope you guys enjoyed. Good luck tomorrow. Peace.